The Adventure of Peter Rabbit. Once upon a time, in a cozy little burrow under a big oak tree, there lived a mischievous young rabbit named Peter. Peter was a curious and energetic rabbit who loved exploring the world around him. He had a white fur coat that was as soft as freshly fallen snow, and his bright eyes sparkled with excitement. Peter lived with his mother, Mrs. Rabbit, and his 3 sisters, Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail. They were a close-knit family, and Mrs. Rabbit always had good advice for her little bunnies. She often warned them about the dangers that lay beyond their burrow, especially Mr. McGregor's garden. Mr. McGregor's garden was a beautiful but forbidden place. It was filled with the most delicious vegetables, ripe fruits, and colorful flowers. Every rabbit in the neighborhood knew that Mr. McGregor was a fierce gardener who didn't like rabbits nibbling on his crops. He had a reputation for chasing away any creature that dared to step foot in his garden. One sunny morning, as Mrs. Rabbit was getting breakfast ready, she warned her children once again about the dangers of Mr. McGregor's garden. "Now, my dear bunnies," she said, "you must stay away from Mr. McGregor's garden. It's not safe there, and he'll chase you away if he catches you. Promise me you'll stay close to our burrow and play in the meadow instead." Peter and his sisters nodded, promising to be good and stay away from the tempting garden. They spent the morning playing in the meadow, hopping through the tall grass, and chasing each other around. But as the day went on, Peter's adventurous spirit got the best of him. "I wonder what's in Mr. McGregor's garden," Peter whispered to his sisters. "Maybe we could sneak a peek." Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail were hesitant, but Peter's excitement was infectious. They decided to follow him to the edge of the garden to see what all the fuss was about. The garden was even more enchanting up close. There were rows of plump, juicy carrots, luscious lettuces, and the most mouth-watering radishes. Peter's tummy rumbled just looking at the delicious vegetables. "Maybe we could just take a quick nibble," Peter suggested, unable to resist the temptation. The sisters looked at each other, unsure if it was a good idea. Just as they were about to take a cautious nibble, a voice boomed from behind them, "What do you think you're doing?" It was Mr. McGregor himself, standing tall, with a shovel in hand. The bunnies' hearts raced with fear as they realized they were caught red-pawed in the garden. "Run!" Peter shouted, and the rabbits dashed away as fast as their little legs could carry them. Mr. McGregor gave chase, shouting and waving his shovel, but the nimble bunnies managed to slip through the fence just in time. They were safe, but they had learned a valuable lesson about the dangers of the garden. From that day on, the bunnies stayed far away from Mr. McGregor's garden. They enjoyed their days in the meadow, playing games, and listening to their mother's stories about other animals in the forest. One morning, as the sun painted the sky with shades of orange and pink, Peter's sisters decided to gather some blackberries for breakfast. Peter, feeling a bit mischievous as usual, had a different idea. "I'm going to find the biggest, juiciest blackberry in the entire forest," he declared. "I'll be back before you know it." With a confident hop, Peter set off on his berry-finding adventure. He hopped over hills, skipped through fields, and even made friends with a friendly butterfly along the way. As he ventured deeper into the forest, he couldn't help but marvel at the beauty of nature all around him. However, Peter's quest for the perfect blackberry led him farther than he had anticipated. The blackberries he found were indeed plump and juicy, but they were surrounded by thick brambles, making it difficult to reach them. Determined to bring back the best berries, Peter carefully wiggled his way through the prickly branches. Just as he reached for the largest blackberry, he heard a low growl. Startled, Peter looked around and saw a large, furry creature with sharp claws and bright eyes staring right at him. It was a woodland bear, and it didn't seem too happy to see a rabbit invading its berry territory. "Oh no," thought Peter, his heart pounding with fear. "I should have listened to my sisters and stayed closer to home." The bear slowly approached, its growls growing louder. Peter knew he had to act fast. He remembered a trick he had learned from his mother. He stood up on his hind legs, trying to look as big as possible, and waved his front paws in the air, just like a fierce creature. "Roar!" he shouted, trying to sound as fierce as he could. The bear was taken aback by Peter's unexpected bravery. It hesitated for a moment, then turned and lumbered away into the forest, leaving Peter alone with the berries. Peter quickly gathered the juiciest blackberries he could find, his heart still racing from the close encounter. He realized that his adventurous spirit had led him into danger once again, and he knew he needed to head back to his burrow before anything else happened. As Peter hopped back through the meadow, carrying a basket filled with delicious blackberries, he couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. He had faced a fearsome bear and returned with the best berries for his family. He also realized that, while adventure was exciting, it was important to be cautious and listen to the wisdom of those who cared about him. When Peter reached his burrow, his sisters were relieved to see him safe and sound. They shared a delicious blackberry breakfast and listened eagerly to Peter's tale of bravery and the encounter with the bear. "Peter," his mother said, her eyes filled with love, "I'm so proud of you for being brave, but always remember that it's important to stay close to home and be cautious. There's a big world out there, and it's full of wonders, but it's essential to balance adventure with safety." Peter nodded, knowing that his mother was right. From that day on, he continued to be the curious and adventurous rabbit he always was, but he also paid attention to the lessons he had learned. He appreciated the beauty of the meadow, the warmth of his burrow, and, most importantly, the love and wisdom of his family. And so, the mischievous young rabbit, Peter, continued to live his days with a spirit of adventure, a heart full of love, and a basket of juicy blackberries to remind him of the day he faced a bear, and learned the value of caution and the importance of family. The Little Pantry Thief. Once upon a time, in a cozy little house on the outskirts of a bustling town, lived a curious and mischievous little mouse named Milo. Milo was a tiny mouse with soft gray fur and bright, beady eyes that sparkled with excitement. He lived with his family in the walls of the house right next to the kitchen pantry. Milo's family was like any other mouse family, but Milo had a little secret. He loved exploring the pantry when everyone was asleep. He was fascinated by the delicious smells that wafted out of the pantry shelves, and he often dreamt of tasting the wonderful treats that were stored inside. One night, when the moon was high in the sky and the house was quiet, Milo decided to embark on a daring adventure. He wanted to find the tastiest treat hidden in the pantry. His tiny heart raced with excitement as he squeezed through a small hole in the wall and entered the pantry. The pantry was a wonderland of food. There were boxes of cereal, jars of peanut butter, and bags of cookies stacked neatly on the shelves. Milo's nose twitched as he smelled the sweet aroma of chocolate chip cookies. He knew he had to find a way to reach them. But there was a problem. The pantry was high up on the shelves, and Milo was a little mouse with short legs. He gazed at the cookies, thinking of a way to get to them. Then, he spotted a bag of flour on a lower shelf. An idea popped into his clever little mind. Milo hopped onto the bag of flour and began to climb. He climbed and climbed, using his tiny claws to grip the bag. It was hard work, but Milo was determined. After what felt like a mouse-sized eternity, he reached the top of the flour bag, and from there, he could almost reach the cookies. With a final leap, Milo jumped onto the cookie jar. He managed to open the lid, and the delicious scent of the cookies filled the air. Milo's mouth watered as he saw the golden brown cookies inside. He grabbed a small piece and scurried back down to the safety of the flour bag to enjoy his stolen treat. The cookie was even more delicious than Milo had imagined. It was crispy on the outside and gooey on the inside, with melty chocolate chips. Milo felt a rush of excitement and a pang of guilt. He knew he shouldn't be taking things from the pantry without asking, but the cookies were just too tempting. Milo decided to take just one more piece, and then he'd be on his way back to the safety of his mouse hole. But as he reached for the second piece, he heard a noise that made his heart skip a beat. Footsteps. Someone was coming to the kitchen. Milo's little mouse heart raced, and he quickly hid behind the flour bag, clutching the stolen cookie in his tiny paws. He watched as a sleepy figure entered the kitchen. It was Timmy, the little boy who lived in the house. Timmy was rubbing his eyes, and he looked like he was searching for something. Milo realized that Timmy was looking for the cookies. Milo felt a twinge of guilt. He didn't want to get caught, and he certainly didn't want to make Timmy sad. With a determined mouse-sized leap, Milo hopped off the flour bag and scurried back up to the cookie jar. He gently pushed the jar's lid back into place, making sure it was closed tightly. Then, he quickly returned to his mouse hole, feeling both proud and a little ashamed of his little pantry adventure. The next morning, as the sun peeked through the windows, Timmy's mother came into the kitchen. She noticed the cookie jar and opened it, expecting to find cookies for breakfast. To her surprise, the jar was full, and the lid was securely closed. "Timmy," she called out, "did you eat the cookies last night?" Timmy, still a little sleepy, shook his head. "No, Mommy, I didn't eat any cookies. Maybe Dad had some." Timmy's mother shrugged, thinking that maybe Timmy's dad had enjoyed a late-night snack. She closed the cookie jar and went about her morning routine. In his mouse hole, Milo smiled to himself. He had managed to save the cookies, and Timmy's mother didn't suspect a thing. Milo realized that, even though he loved the idea of stealing treats from the pantry, it felt even better to do the right thing. From that day on, Milo still loved the smell of the pantry, but he never took anything without asking. Instead, he would peek out from his mouse hole and watch as Timmy's family enjoyed their meals and snacks. It made Milo happy to see the joy on their faces, and he knew he was part of a little secret, the little pantry thief who became a pantry protector. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, Milo grew up to be a wise and responsible mouse. He shared his stories with the younger mice, teaching them the importance of honesty and the joy of doing the right thing. And even though he never took another cookie, he still enjoyed the sweet smell of the pantry and the happiness it brought to Timmy's family. And so, the curious and mischievous little mouse, Milo, continued to live in the cozy little house, surrounded by the love of his family and the warmth of the pantry, where he learned that sometimes the best treat of all is the feeling of doing something kind and making others happy. The kind-hearted princess. Once upon a time, in a grand kingdom, there lived a sweet and gentle girl named Cinderella. She had a heart as pure as a crystal stream, and her kindness touched everyone she met. Cinderella's mother had passed away when she was young, leaving her in the care of her stepmother and two stepsisters, Anastasia and Drizella. Cinderella's stepfamily, unfortunately, was not kind like she was. They made her do all the housework and treated her like a servant. They gave her the nickname Cinderella because she often had ashes on her face from cleaning the fireplace. Despite the unkindness of her stepfamily, Cinderella remained cheerful and never let their mistreatment change her loving nature. She found solace in the company of the friendly birds and mice that lived in the corners of the house. They would sing and chirp, making her smile even on the toughest days. One day, a grand announcement arrived in the kingdom. The king was throwing a royal ball at the palace, and everyone was invited, including Cinderella's family. Cinderella's stepsisters were overjoyed, but they were also quite worried about what to wear to the ball. "Cinderella, you shall prepare our gowns and make us look the most beautiful," ordered the stepsisters, already imagining how they would charm the prince with their beauty. Cinderella nodded, knowing that she had to help her stepsisters despite her own desire to attend the ball. She lovingly sewed beautiful gowns for Anastasia and Drizella, all the while humming a cheerful tune. As the day of the ball approached, Cinderella's stepsisters were bustling with excitement, but they showed no gratitude to Cinderella for her hard work. They were so absorbed in themselves that they didn't realize how tired and sad Cinderella felt, longing to go to the ball herself. The night of the ball finally arrived, and Cinderella's stepsisters were whisked away in a grand carriage, leaving Cinderella behind. She watched them leave from the window, a tear trickling down her cheek. Alone in her room, Cinderella wished she could attend the ball, if only for a moment. Suddenly, a gentle, glowing light filled the room, and a kind fairy appeared before her. "I am your fairy godmother," the fairy said, her voice as soft as a whisper. "I see the goodness in your heart, Cinderella. I will help you go to the ball." With a wave of her wand, the fairy godmother transformed Cinderella's simple dress into a magnificent ball gown, more beautiful than anything she had ever seen. She also turned a pumpkin into a splendid carriage, and the mice and birds that had befriended Cinderella became magnificent horses and carriage attendants. "Remember, my dear," the fairy godmother said, "you must leave the ball by midnight, for when the clock strikes 12, the magic will end, and everything will return to how it was." Cinderella thanked her fairy godmother and promised to return by midnight. With a joyful heart, she set off to the palace. At the palace, the prince was delighted to see Cinderella. Her beauty radiated from within, and her kind nature captured his heart. They danced and laughed, and Cinderella felt like she was in a dream. But as the clock on the wall struck 11, she remembered the warning of her fairy godmother, and hurriedly bid the prince farewell. In her haste, Cinderella left behind a delicate glass slipper. The prince, enchanted by Cinderella, wanted to find the mysterious beauty who had captured his heart. He declared that he would marry the woman whose foot fit the glass slipper. The next day, the prince's messengers arrived at Cinderella's house, carrying the glass slipper. Anastasia and Drizella tried, with all their might, to fit their feet into the delicate slipper, but it was no use, their feet were too large. When it was Cinderella's turn to try on the slipper, her heart fluttered with hope. She slipped her foot into the glass slipper, and it was a perfect fit. The prince recognized her instantly as the beautiful girl from the ball, and he knew that he had found his true love. The prince asked Cinderella to marry him, and she joyfully accepted. As Cinderella stood beside the prince, her kindness and love shone brightly, just like her inner beauty. Cinderella's stepmother and stepsisters were astonished when they realized that the kind-hearted girl they had mistreated was now the future queen. They felt regretful for their actions and apologized to Cinderella, who forgave them with the same kindness that had always been in her heart. From that day on, Cinderella lived in the palace with the prince, spreading her warmth and kindness throughout the kingdom. She continued to be friends with the birds and mice, and she always remembered the lessons she had learned from her fairy godmother to be kind, patient, and loving no matter the circumstances. And so, the sweet and gentle girl, Cinderella, became not only a princess but also a beacon of kindness and love, reminding everyone that true beauty shines from within, and that a loving heart can overcome even the most challenging circumstances, just like Cinderella's did, bringing happiness to her and to all who knew her.